The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of the small art studio on Maple Street, casting golden rectangles across the worn wooden floor. Elaine Moore stood before her easel, a paintbrush poised in her weathered hand, studying the canvas with the intensity of someone reading a complex text. The half-finished portrait before her showed Mrs. Peterson, the bakery owner, her kind eyes crinkling at the corners, her smile warm and genuine. At 66 years old, Elaine had the kind of face that spoke of a life fully lived. Her silver hair was pulled back in a loose bun, revealing high cheekbones and thoughtful gray eyes that seemed to see more than most. Fine lines etched the corners of those eyes, like the marks of an artist who had sketched too many faces, remembered too many details. Her hands, though gentle now as they held the brush, had a steadiness that came from years of precise work. The studio itself reflected her simple life in Glenford. It was a single large room above the hardware store, with north-facing windows that provided perfect light. Canvases in various stages of completion lined the walls. Some showed the weathered faces of farmers who had worked the surrounding lands for generations. Others captured young couples on their wedding days, their hopeful faces immortalized in oil and canvas. There were portraits of children, elderly couples, town officials, and ordinary people who wanted a piece of themselves preserved in art. Elaine had lived in Glenford for 15 years, and in that time she had become as much a part of the town's fabric as the old courthouse or the covered bridge over Miller's Creek. People knew her as the quiet artist who could capture not just a face, but somehow the essence of a person. She had a gift, they said, for seeing the truth in people. What they did not know was where that gift truly came from. The bell above the studio door chimed softly, pulling Elaine from her concentration. She set down her brush and turned to see Tom Harrison, the owner of the hardware store below, climbing the stairs with his characteristic heavy tread. "Morning, Elaine," he called out, slightly out of breath from the climb. Tom was in his early 70s, with a round belly and a face that was almost always smiling. "Brought you some coffee from Maggie's place. Figured you'd been at it since dawn again." Elaine accepted the steaming cup with a grateful smile. "You know me too well, Tom. Thank you." "Mrs. Peterson's portrait coming along?" Tom moved closer to examine the canvas, his hands clasped behind his back in the pose of someone viewing art in a museum. "It's getting there. I want to capture that spark she has, the warmth she brings to everyone who walks into her bakery. Well, you've got her eyes just right. That's the look she gives you when you're trying to decide between the apple pie and the cherry, and she tells you to just get both." Tom chuckled, his belly shaking with the laughter. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, sipping their coffee. This was one of the things Elaine loved about Glenford, the easy companionship, the lack of pressure to fill every moment with words. In the city, where she had lived before, silence had felt heavy, loaded with unspoken tensions. Here, silence was simply peace. "Town council meeting tonight," Tom mentioned casually. "They're talking about the fall festival again. Sarah Chen from the library is presenting some ideas about making it more community-focused. You should come." Elaine nodded. "I'll try. I'm hoping to finish this portrait by the end of the week. Don't work too hard. You're not as young as you used to be." Tom said it with affection, the way people in small towns felt entitled to comment on such things. "None of us are, Tom. None of us are." After Tom left, Elaine returned to her work, but her mind wandered. Sarah Chen. The young librarian had moved to Glenford about 5 years ago, full of energy and ideas for revitalizing the town's small library. She had started a book club, organized reading programs for children, and had even convinced the council to allocate funds for updating the library's computer system. Sarah was one of those rare people who seemed to genuinely care about every person she met. She remembered details about people's lives, asked follow-up questions about their families, their hobbies, their concerns. She had sat for a portrait with Elaine 2 years ago, and during the sessions, they had talked about books, about art, about the quiet beauty of small-town life. Elaine had been careful during those sessions, as she always was, to reveal little about her own past. She had become an expert at deflection, at turning conversations back to the other person, at being interested without being open. It was a survival skill she had learned well. The morning passed in the rhythm of work. Brush strokes, mixing colors, stepping back to assess, moving forward to refine. Elaine lost herself in the process, in the meditation of creating. This was her sanctuary now, this studio, this work. It was so different from what she had done before, yet it used the same core skills: observation, attention to detail, the ability to see what others missed. At noon, she cleaned her brushes and locked up the studio. Glenford's main street was bustling with midday activity. The hardware store had customers carrying bags of supplies. Maggie's coffee house had its usual lunch crowd spilling onto the sidewalk tables. The Peterson bakery had a line of people waiting for fresh bread and pastries. Elaine walked past it all with a slight smile, nodding to familiar faces, exchanging brief greetings. She knew these people, not intimately, but in the way small-town residents know each other, through shared space, through repeated encounters, through the collective experience of living in the same place. She had lunch at the diner, a simple affair of soup and salad, eaten while reading a mystery novel. She had always loved mysteries, the way they presented puzzles to be solved, patterns to be found. It was harmless now, this interest, just entertainment. Before, it had been her life. After lunch, she walked to the library. It was a beautiful old building, red brick with white trim, sitting on a small hill overlooking the town square. Sarah had transformed it over the years, making it a genuine community hub. The children's section was bright and welcoming, with colorful murals on the walls. The adult section had comfortable chairs and good lighting. The community room hosted everything from town meetings to yoga classes. Sarah was at the front desk when Elaine entered, helping an elderly man find a book on local history. Her dark hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and she wore one of her typical casual but professional outfits: slacks and a cardigan. When she saw Elaine, her face lit up with genuine pleasure. "Elaine! Perfect timing. I just got in that new art book you requested." "Wonderful. How are the festival plans coming along?" Sarah's enthusiasm was immediate and infectious. "Oh, I'm so excited about it. I'm proposing we do a showcase of local artists this year. Not just paintings, but photography, sculpture, craft work, everything. We could use the community room for displays and maybe set up booths outside for demonstrations. What do you think?" "I think it sounds lovely. Count me in if you need participants." They talked for a few more minutes about the details, about potential artists to include, about timing and logistics. Sarah had a notebook where she had sketched out ideas, her handwriting neat and organized. Elaine found herself genuinely engaged, offering suggestions, feeling that small spark of connection that came from working on something creative with someone who cared. When Elaine left the library with her book, she felt lighter somehow. This was her life now, and it was good. Simple, peaceful, meaningful in its own quiet way. She had left behind the darkness of her previous career, the weight of what she had seen, the nightmares that had plagued her for years. The afternoon was spent back in her studio, working on Mrs. Peterson's portrait. By the time the light began to fade, she had made good progress. The painting was nearly complete, just needing some final touches. She could feel it in her bones when a portrait was almost done, when it had captured not just the physical likeness, but something deeper. The town council meeting was held at 7 in the community room of the library. Elaine arrived a few minutes early and found a seat toward the back. The room gradually filled with familiar faces: shopkeepers, farmers, retirees, young families. This was Glenford in microcosm, the people who made up the fabric of the town. Mayor Bradley called the meeting to order with his usual friendly efficiency. There were updates on road repairs, discussions about the budget for the school system, news about a grant application for park improvements. Elaine listened with half attention, her mind partly on the portrait waiting in her studio. Then Sarah stood up to present her festival ideas, and Elaine found herself fully engaged. Sarah was a natural presenter, her enthusiasm balanced with practical details, her vision clear but open to input. She showed sketches and layouts, talked about potential costs and benefits, addressed concerns before they were raised. The council members asked questions, most of them supportive. Tom Harrison, who served on the council, was particularly enthusiastic. "I think it's a great idea. We've been doing the same festival format for 20 years. Time to shake things up a bit, bring in something fresh." There was general agreement, and the motion passed with a vote to allocate funds for Sarah's expanded festival concept. As people began to file out of the meeting, many stopped to congratulate Sarah, to offer help, to express excitement about the plans. Elaine waited until the crowd thinned, then approached Sarah. "You did wonderfully. The town is lucky to have you." Sarah beamed. "Thank you. I'm just so glad they're willing to try something new." "Elaine, I was hoping you might consider not just participating, but maybe helping me coordinate the art showcase. You know all the local artists, and people respect your judgment." Elaine hesitated. It would mean being more visible, taking on a role with more responsibility. But looking at Sarah's hopeful face, she found herself nodding. "I'd be happy to help." They made plans to meet later in the week to start planning, and then Elaine walked home through the quiet streets. Her apartment was above a small shop that sold antiques, a cozy space with high ceilings and good light. She had furnished it simply but comfortably: a worn leather couch, bookshelves lining one wall, a small kitchen that was adequate for her needs. That night, she sat by the window with a cup of tea, looking out at the town she had come to love. Glenford had given her something she had desperately needed 15 years ago: a fresh start, a place to heal, a chance to be someone other than who she had been. She thought about her old life, which she tried not to do often. The memories were locked away in a mental box she rarely opened. But sometimes, like tonight, they crept out around the edges. She had been good at her job, very good. As a forensic photographer for the police department in a major city, she had documented crime scenes for 20 years. Her photographs had helped solve countless cases, had provided crucial evidence, had brought justice to victims and their families. But the cost had been high. Every crime scene she photographed had left an imprint on her memory. The details that others might forget, she remembered with perfect clarity. It was the curse of her particular talent, the ability to see, to really see, and to remember it all. For years, she had managed. She had compartmentalized, told herself it was necessary work, used the standard coping mechanisms. But then had come the case that broke her. She still could not think about it without feeling the panic rise in her chest, the old nightmares threatening to return. She had quit the next day. Not given 2 weeks' notice, not tried to push through, just quit. She had told her captain she was done, had cleaned out her desk, and had left without looking back. Her therapist had supported the decision, had said it was self-preservation, had helped her understand that sometimes survival meant walking away. She had chosen Glenford almost at random. She had been driving west, looking for distance from her old life when she had seen the exit sign. Something about the name had appealed to her. Glenford, a glen by a ford, a crossing place, a transition. She had taken the exit, driven into town, seen the for rent sign on the apartment window, and had known this was where she would stop running. The transition to portrait artist had been natural in some ways. She had always been artistic, had taken photography in college before deciding on criminal justice. Her eye for composition, her understanding of light and shadow, her ability to capture the essential nature of a subject, these skills translated well to painting. But more than that, portrait painting was healing. It was about capturing beauty, dignity, the best in people. It was about celebration instead of documentation of tragedy. It was about life instead of death. Elaine finished her tea and went to bed, but sleep came slowly. The memories, once stirred, were reluctant to settle. She lay in the darkness, willing herself to think of pleasant things. The progress on Mrs. Peterson's portrait, the excited look on Sarah's face at the meeting, the warm sense of community she had felt in the library's community room. Eventually she slept, and thankfully her dreams were peaceful. The next few days passed in their familiar rhythm. Elaine finished Mrs. Peterson's portrait and delivered it to the bakery, where the owner's reaction, tears of joy and a bone-crushing hug, made all the hours of work worthwhile. She started a new commission, a golden wedding anniversary portrait of the Hendersons, a couple who had lived in Glenford their entire lives. On Wednesday afternoon, she met Sarah at the library to begin planning the art showcase. Sarah had already started a list of potential participants, organized by medium and type of work. "I thought we could arrange it by theme, rather than just by artist," Sarah explained, her enthusiasm evident in her animated gestures. Like, have a section on Glenford landscapes, another on portraits of our town, maybe one on local crafts and traditions. What do you think? Elaine studied the list, her analytical mind automatically organizing and categorizing. That could work well. It tells a story about the town, rather than just displaying individual pieces. Exactly. Sarah pulled out a sketch of the library's community room with possible layouts marked. And we could have the artists present at certain times to talk about their work, maybe even do demonstrations. They spent 2 hours discussing details, making lists, dividing up tasks. Elaine found herself genuinely enjoying the collaboration. Sarah had a creative mind but appreciated practical input, and they worked well together, each contributing different strengths to the planning. As they were finishing up, Sarah's phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it and smiled. "My friend Jessica wants to know if I'm still up for our hike this weekend. We've been planning to explore that old trail up by Miller's Ridge." "I didn't know there were trails up there," Elaine said. "Oh, yes, some great ones. There's an old hiking path that leads to some beautiful viewpoints. Jessica's really into photography, so she wants to capture the fall colors. I'm just excited for the exercise and fresh air." Sarah's face lit up with anticipation. "We're planning to make a whole day of it. Pack a lunch, maybe find that old abandoned cabin that's supposed to be up there somewhere." "Sounds lovely. Be careful, though. Those trails can be tricky if they're not well maintained." "Don't worry, we're prepared. Jessica has all the safety equipment, and we'll have our phones, maps, the whole works. Besides, it's supposed to be beautiful weather this weekend." They confirmed their next meeting for the following week and parted ways. Elaine walked home thinking about the showcase, already mentally composing a list of artists she should contact. Thursday and Friday were busy with regular work. Elaine had the Henderson portrait to start, plus several smaller commissions from townspeople wanting holiday gifts for relatives. She worked long hours in her studio, losing herself in the familiar movements of brush on canvas, the mixing of colors, the gradual emergence of faces from blank space. On Friday evening, she attended the weekly book club that Sarah ran at the library. It was a small group, 8 regular members who gathered to discuss their latest read. This month, it was a historical novel set during World War II, and the discussion was lively and thoughtful. Sarah was an excellent moderator, asking probing questions, making connections between themes, encouraging quieter members to share their thoughts. Elaine observed her with appreciation, seeing again that quality that made Sarah special, her genuine interest in people, her ability to create space where everyone felt heard. After the book club ended, several members stayed to chat. Sarah mentioned her planned hike again, showing them some photos on her phone of the area she and Jessica would explore. "Look at this view!" she exclaimed, zooming in on a panoramic shot someone had posted online. "Jessica says the fall colors should be at peak this weekend. We're planning to leave early Saturday morning." "Just be careful," Mrs. Henderson cautioned. She was the type who worried about everyone. "Those mountain areas can be unpredictable." "We will be, I promise. Jessica is very experienced with outdoor activities. We're just excited for an adventure." Elaine looked at the photo Sarah was showing. Her trained eye automatically noted details: the elevation, the density of the forest, the quality of the light in the image. The photographer who had taken it had known what they were doing, capturing the depth and dimension of the landscape. "It looks beautiful," Elaine said. "I hope you get perfect weather for it." Saturday morning dawned clear and bright. Elaine spent it working in her studio, making good progress on the Henderson portrait. She captured Mr. Henderson's gentle dignity and Mrs. Henderson's warm smile, the way they sat together with the ease of 50 years of partnership. At noon, she took a break and walked downtown for lunch. The town was busy with weekend activity: families shopping, teenagers congregating by the fountain in the square, elderly couples taking leisurely walks. It was the kind of scene Norman Rockwell might have painted, quintessentially American small-town life. She saw Tom outside his hardware store, deep in conversation with Sheriff Martinez. The sheriff was relatively new to Glenford, having taken the position 2 years ago after retiring from a larger police department. He was a good sheriff, fair, competent, respected by the community. "Afternoon, Elaine," Tom called out when he saw her. "Sheriff and I were just talking about security for the fall festival." "It's a good idea to plan ahead," Elaine said, joining them. Sheriff Martinez nodded. "With the expanded format Sarah's proposing, we'll have more people than usual. Just want to make sure everything runs smoothly." They chatted for a few minutes about logistics, and then Elaine continued to the diner. She ate her lunch while reading, enjoying the peaceful afternoon. Sunday morning followed the same pattern: work in the studio, a quiet routine. Elaine had lived alone for so long now that she barely noticed it anymore. She was content with her own company, with the quiet rhythms of her life. It wasn't until Sunday evening, when she went to the grocery store, that she first sensed something was off. The store was busier than usual for a Sunday evening. People clustered in small groups, talking in low, concerned voices. Elaine picked up fragments of conversation as she moved through the aisles. "Hasn't come back yet. Tried calling, but no answer. Should have been home yesterday." A cold feeling settled in Elaine's stomach. She knew that tone, that worried undercurrent. Something had happened. She found Mrs. Peterson by the checkout, talking intensely with several other women. When Elaine approached, Mrs. Peterson's worried face turned to her. "Oh, Elaine, have you heard? Sarah Chen went hiking yesterday morning and hasn't come back. Her friend Jessica is frantic. They were supposed to hike together, but Sarah went ahead early and Jessica had to cancel at the last minute due to a family emergency. Sarah's phone is going straight to voicemail, and she hasn't been seen since Saturday morning." The cold feeling intensified. Has anyone notified the sheriff? Yes, Jessica reported it this afternoon when Sarah still hadn't returned. The sheriff has organized a search, but they're waiting until morning to start because it'll be dark soon. They're asking for volunteers to help search tomorrow. Elaine's mind was already working, clicking through possibilities and scenarios with an efficiency she had thought long dormant. Where exactly was she planning to hike? That trail up by Miller's Ridge? You know, the one that leads to the old viewpoints. Jessica said Sarah wanted to find that abandoned cabin that's supposed to be up there. Miller's Ridge. Elaine knew it by sight, but had never hiked there. It was rugged terrain, heavily forested, with several trails that crossed and intersected. Easy to get disoriented, especially for someone hiking alone. I'll be there tomorrow to help search, Elaine said. That night, sleep evaded her. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind refusing to quiet. Sarah Chen, missing in the woods. 28 years old, her whole life ahead of her, vanished somewhere on those trails. Elaine's old instincts were surfacing, the ones she had worked so hard to suppress. The analytical part of her brain that had made her excellent at her job was spinning up, processing information, looking for patterns, seeing details others might miss. She got up and made tea, sitting by the window with her laptop. She searched for information about Miller's Ridge, about the trails, about the terrain. She found several hiking blogs and photo collections, people who had explored the area and documented their experiences. The photos told her what she needed to know. Miller's Ridge was challenging terrain, steep in places, with multiple trails that branched and diverged. The old cabin that hikers sometimes mentioned was off the main trail, accessible only by a path that was poorly marked and easy to miss. Cell phone coverage would be spotty at best, non-existent in many areas. If Sarah had strayed off the main trail, if she had gotten turned around or injured, she could be anywhere in several square miles of dense forest. Elaine's hands trembled slightly as she set down her teacup. She recognized what was happening. She was falling back into old patterns, seeing this as a case to solve rather than simply a community crisis. But she couldn't help it. Her brain wouldn't turn off the analysis, wouldn't stop seeing the details, forming theories, calculating probabilities. Sarah had left early Saturday morning. It was now Sunday night, more than 36 hours. If she was injured, time was critical. If she was simply lost, she might be walking in circles, exhausting herself. The weather had been good, which was fortunate, but nights in the mountains were cold even in early autumn. Elaine forced herself to return to bed, but sleep came only in fitful patches. She dreamed of searching through dense forests, calling out names, finding nothing but empty trails and silent trees. Monday morning arrived gray and overcast. Elaine was up before dawn, dressing in practical clothes for hiking, sturdy boots she rarely wore, jeans, layers she could remove if she got hot from walking. She filled a backpack with water, snacks, a first aid kit, and a flashlight, preparing as if for a day-long expedition. The gathering point for search volunteers was the town hall parking lot. When Elaine arrived at 7 a.m., more than 50 people were already there. The entire town, it seemed, had turned out to help find Sarah. Sheriff Martinez stood on the front steps of the town hall, organizing the crowd with calm efficiency. He had a map of the area spread out, dividing the terrain into search sectors. "All right, everyone, listen up," he called out, and the crowd quieted. "We're going to search in teams of 4. Safety is the priority here. I don't want anyone else getting lost or hurt. Each team will take a specific sector, and I want you to stay in communication with your team at all times." He explained the communication system. Each team would have a walkie-talkie to stay in touch with the command post he was setting up at the trailhead. He reviewed safety protocols, what to do if they found anything. how to signal if they needed help. Elaine listened carefully, her mind automatically organizing the information, mentally mapping the terrain based on the sectors being described. She noticed details others might miss: the sheriff's choice to prioritize certain areas based on probability, the way he was keeping inexperienced hikers in safer, more accessible zones, while sending the most capable volunteers to the more challenging terrain. She ended up in a team with Tom Harrison, the local doctor, Dr. Reynolds, and a younger man named Mike, who worked for the Forestry Service and knew the trails well. They were assigned to Sector 3, which included a portion of the main trail and several offshoot paths. As they hiked toward their designated area, Mike explained the terrain. This sector has 3 smaller trails that branch off the main one. They're not well marked, just old paths that hunters and experienced hikers use. If Sarah wandered off the main trail looking for photo opportunities or trying to find that cabin, she could have ended up on any of these. The search was methodical and exhausting. They walked slowly, calling Sarah's name, looking for any signs of passage, disturbed vegetation, footprints, dropped items. The forest was beautiful in its autumn colors, but Elaine barely noticed. Her focus was absolute, her eyes scanning continuously, looking for anything out of place. Her old training was coming back in full force. She saw the forest not as a scenic landscape, but as a scene to be documented and understood. She noted where vegetation was disturbed, where the path showed recent use, where someone might have stepped off the trail. "You're really good at this," Dr. Reynolds commented during a break. "The way you're examining everything, like you've done search and rescue before." Elaine deflected smoothly. "I just have an eye for detail. Artist's training, I suppose." They searched through the morning and into the afternoon, covering their entire sector with painstaking thoroughness. They found nothing, no signs of Sarah, no evidence of anyone having been through the area recently besides other hikers. When they returned to the command post at 4 p.m., other teams were reporting similar results. Sarah's friend Jessica was there, her face drawn with worry and lack of sleep. She was talking to the sheriff, showing him something on her phone. Elaine moved closer, her curiosity and concern driving her. Jessica was showing the sheriff photographs. "These are the pictures Sarah sent me Saturday morning before she set out," Jessica was saying, her voice tight with stress. "See, this is the trailhead, and this is the map of the route she planned to take. She was so excited. She sent me like 5 pictures before she even started hiking." Elaine looked over Jessica's shoulder at the phone screen. The photos showed Sarah smiling at the trailhead, then a shot of a trail map posted at the start of the path, then a scenic view looking up the mountain. "Did she send any more after these?" Sheriff Martinez asked. "No. These were around 7:30 a.m. After that, nothing. Her phone must have lost signal once she got higher up." The sheriff nodded grimly. "We'll continue the search tomorrow. We're losing light now, but we'll start again at first light. We'll expand the search area, bring in some trained search and rescue teams from the county." As people began to disperse, exhausted and discouraged, Elaine stood staring at Jessica's phone screen. Something was nagging at her, something she couldn't quite pin down. She looked at the photos again, her trained eye moving over every detail. "May I?" she asked Jessica, gesturing to the phone. Jessica handed it over without question. Elaine zoomed in on each photo, studying them with intensity. The trailhead photo showed Sarah in her hiking gear, backpack on, smiling confidently. The trail map photo was clear enough to read the routes and landmarks marked on it. The scenic view photo showed the path ahead, trees on either side, morning light filtering through the leaves. "Can you send these to me?" Elaine asked. "I'd like to study them more carefully. Sometimes photographs can reveal details that might help." Jessica looked confused, but nodded. "Sure, I guess. What's your number?" After Jessica sent the photos, Elaine walked home in the gathering dusk, her mind churning. She knew what she was doing was risky, allowing herself to fall back into old patterns, using skills she had sworn she would never use again. But this was Sarah. Sarah, who had welcomed her into the book club, who had trusted her to help with the festival, who represented all the good things about Glenford. At home, Elaine transferred the photos to her laptop and opened them in her photo editing software. She still had all her old tools, the programs she had used in her forensic photography days. She had never quite been able to delete them, and now she was grateful. She started with the trail map photo, enhancing it, zooming in until she could read every detail. The map showed several trails, with the main path marked in red and smaller trails in blue and green. Landmarks were noted, viewpoints, a creek crossing, and yes, there it was. Old Shepherd's Cabin, 2.3 miles off main trail via unmarked path. Elaine sat back, her heart beating faster. The cabin. Sarah had mentioned it to Jessica, had talked about wanting to find it. But where was this unmarked path? The map didn't show it clearly. She moved to the scenic view photo, the one showing the trail ahead. She enhanced it, adjusted the contrast, looked at every visible detail. The trees, the path, the way the light fell. It told her this photo was taken early morning, probably within the first hour of hiking. The angle of the shadows confirmed it, but it was what was in the background, barely visible, that caught her eye. Zooming in, enhancing further, she could see what looked like a faint trail diverging to the right, almost hidden by undergrowth. A path not on the main trail, easy to miss if you weren't looking for it. Elaine pulled up a topographical map of Miller's Ridge on another screen, comparing it with the trail map photo. Using her knowledge of the terrain from her research and from the day's search, she began to trace possible routes. If Sarah had taken that faint side trail visible in her photo, thinking it might lead to the cabin, where would she have ended up? Elaine traced the likely path, considering the terrain, the natural routes someone would follow. There were several old logging roads in that area, abandoned decades ago and now overgrown. The cabin Jessica had mentioned, the old shepherd's cabin, was probably near one of those old roads. It would have been built when there was access, back before the area was allowed to return to forest. Elaine pulled up satellite imagery, looking for clearings that might indicate structures. The resolution wasn't great, but she could make out what might be a small clearing roughly 2.5 miles from where Sarah's photo was taken, in a direction consistent with someone following that faint trail. She looked at the clock, 9 p.m. Too late to call the sheriff, and besides, what would she say? I enhanced some photos, and I think I might know where to look. It sounded presumptuous, and she had no authority here. She was just a portrait artist, as far as anyone in Glenford knew, but she could prepare. If her theory was right, she could identify exactly where to search. She could map it out, make it easy for the search teams to check this area. She worked late into the night, documenting everything she had found, creating a clear presentation of her analysis. She marked coordinates, drew routes on the map, explained her reasoning step by step. It was like writing a report for her old captain, presenting evidence in a clear, logical manner. When she finally went to bed at 2 a.m., she was exhausted, but felt more focused than she had in years. The old skills hadn't faded. They had only been dormant, waiting for when they might be needed. Tuesday morning, Elaine was back at the town hall before most of the volunteers arrived. She found Sheriff Martinez setting up for the day, looking tired but determined. Sheriff, do you have a moment? Elaine approached him, clutching the folder containing her analysis. He looked up from his maps. Elaine, morning. You're here early. Heading out with the search teams again? Yes, but first, I wanted to show you something. I studied the photographs that Sarah sent to Jessica, and I think I may have found something that could help narrow the search. She spread out her printouts on the table. walking him through her analysis step by step. She showed him the enhanced image of the faint trail, the topographical analysis, the satellite imagery, her calculated coordinates for where the cabin might be located. Sheriff Martinez listened with growing interest, his experienced eyes following her logic. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment, studying the materials. "This is impressive work," he said finally. "Where did you learn to do analysis like this?" Elaine had prepared for this question. "I used to do photography work that required attention to detail. I've always been good at seeing things in images that others might miss." It wasn't quite a lie, just an incomplete truth. "Well, your attention to detail might have just given us our best lead yet." He picked up his radio. "I'm going to send a team to check this area immediately. The coordinates you've identified are outside our current search grid. We were focusing more on the main trails and the areas closer to them." Within 15 minutes, a specialized team was assembled. Mike from the Forestry Service, 2 experienced search and rescue volunteers from the county, and Sheriff Martinez himself. They invited Elaine to come along, given that she had identified the area. The hike to the location was challenging. They left the main trail where Elaine had indicated, following the barely visible path that appeared in Sarah's photo. Mike confirmed that this was indeed an old trail, one that hadn't been maintained in years. "I'd forgotten this path was even here," he admitted. "We don't include it in our official trail maps because it's too overgrown and unmarked. But years ago, it did lead to some of the old logging areas." As they pushed deeper into the forest, following Elaine's calculated route, the sense of remoteness grew. This was not an area casual hikers would find. The path was difficult to follow, and several times they had to stop and search for where it continued. Elaine's mind was fully engaged now, reading the terrain like text, seeing the subtle signs of possible passage. A broken branch here, disturbed leaf litter there. Her old skills were firing on all cylinders, and she had stopped trying to suppress them. They had been hiking for nearly 2 hours when Mike, who was leading, stopped abruptly. "There," he said, pointing ahead through the trees. Through a gap in the foliage, they could see a small clearing. And in that clearing, the remains of a structure. Weathered wood, a sagging roof, an old cabin nearly consumed by the forest around it. The team moved forward quickly but cautiously. As they entered the clearing, Elaine's heart was pounding. This was it, the old shepherd's cabin. The question was whether Sarah had made it this far. Sheriff Martinez called out, "Sarah! Sarah Chen! Can you hear me?" For a moment, there was only silence. Then faintly, from inside the cabin, a weak voice responded, "Here! I'm here!" The relief that flooded through Elaine was so intense, it made her knees weak. The team rushed to the cabin's door, which was partially blocked by fallen debris. "Sarah, it's Sheriff Martinez. We're getting you out. Are you hurt?" "My ankle," Sarah's voice came back, stronger now. "I fell on the way to the cabin. I've been stuck here since Saturday afternoon." It took several minutes to clear the door and enter the cabin. Sarah was sitting against the far wall, her right ankle clearly swollen, her face drawn and pale, but alert. She had her jacket wrapped around her, and what looked like emergency supplies from her backpack spread nearby. The search and rescue team immediately went to work, assessing her condition, providing water and food, preparing to transport her out. Sarah's eyes found Elaine in the group. "You came. I knew. I knew people would search. I tried to stay near the cabin because I thought if anyone did look, this would be a landmark." "You did exactly right," one of the search and rescue volunteers assured her. "Staying in one place, conserving your energy. You made good decisions." As they prepared to move Sarah, Elaine stepped outside the cabin to give them space to work. She walked around the clearing, her investigator's eye still active, noting details. Sarah's footprints were visible in the soft ground near the cabin, showing where she had circled the structure. There were signs she had tried to gather wood for a fire but had been limited by her injury. Near the edge of the clearing, Elaine found Sarah's phone, the screen shattered from a fall. That explained the lack of communication. The phone had broken when Sarah fell. She picked it up carefully and brought it to Sheriff Martinez. Found this. Screen is broken, but it might still work enough to retrieve any photos or data. He took it with a nod. Good find. Every piece of information helps us understand what happened. The journey back down the mountain was slow and careful. They had called for additional help, and halfway down the trail, they met a larger group coming up with a proper stretcher and medical equipment. Dr. Reynolds was with them, and he immediately began a more thorough examination of Sarah. Definitely a fractured ankle, he confirmed. But considering she's been out here for more than 2 days, she's in remarkably good condition. She stayed hydrated from her water bottles and the small creek near the cabin, stayed relatively warm, didn't panic. Smart young woman. By the time they reached the trailhead, word had spread through Glenford. A crowd had gathered, relieved, joyful, eager to welcome Sarah back. Jessica was there, tears streaming down her face as she saw her friend being brought out of the forest. An ambulance was waiting to take Sarah to the hospital in the next town for proper treatment. As they were loading her in, Sarah caught Elaine's eye and mouthed, "Thank you." Elaine nodded, emotion thick in her throat. This was why she had done the work she used to do, the reason she had pushed herself through difficult cases for 20 years. Not for the darkness and the trauma, but for moments like this, bringing someone home safe. The next few days were a whirlwind in Glenford. Sarah's rescue was the only topic of conversation. The local newspaper ran a front-page story with the headline, "Librarian Found Safe After 3 Days in Wilderness." The article praised the search effort, the volunteers who had given their time, and specifically mentioned the careful analysis of photographic evidence that had led searchers to the cabin's location. Elaine tried to stay in the background, deflecting credit, but it was difficult. People kept approaching her, thanking her, expressing amazement at how she had figured out where to look. "It was just careful observation," she said repeatedly. "Anyone with experience in photography could have done the same." But that wasn't quite true, and she knew it. What she had done required specific training, specialized knowledge, years of experience looking at photographs with a forensic eye. It wasn't the kind of skill that casual photographers typically developed. Sheriff Martinez visited her studio on Thursday afternoon. She had been expecting something like this and had mentally prepared her responses. "Elaine," he started, settling into the chair she offered, "I wanted to thank you personally for your help with the search. Without your analysis of those photos, we might not have found Sarah in time. I'm glad I could help. How is she doing?" "Remarkably well, all things considered. The ankle will take weeks to heal, but there's no permanent damage. She's already asking when she can go back to work." He paused, studying Elaine with a thoughtful expression. "The thing is, what you did, the photo analysis, the route calculation, the way you examined that scene, that's not typical civilian skill. That's professional-level forensic analysis." Elaine met his gaze steadily. "I told you, I used to do photography work." "What kind of photography work exactly?" She had known this question was coming and had decided on a version of the truth. Lying wouldn't serve anyone, and Sheriff Martinez deserved honesty, especially after what they had just been through together. "I was a forensic photographer," she said quietly. "I worked for a police department for 20 years, documenting crime scenes, analyzing evidence photos, providing visual documentation for investigations." Understanding dawned in the sheriff's eyes. "That explains a lot. You're very good at what you do, or what you did." "I left that work 15 years ago. I needed a change, a different life." Was it difficult? The work, I mean. Elaine nodded. Very. It took a toll I didn't fully recognize until it was almost too late. Coming here, starting over as a portrait artist, it saved me in many ways. Sheriff Martinez was quiet for a moment. I understand. I left my old department for similar reasons. Too many years seeing the worst of humanity. Not enough balance. Coming to Glenford has been good for me, too. They sat in comfortable silence. Two people who understood the weight of certain types of work, the cost of exposure to repeated trauma. Will you tell people? Elaine asked. About my background? That's your choice to make, not mine. But I will say this. What you did to find Sarah was remarkable, and this town owes you a debt. If it were me, I wouldn't hide that skill. It's a gift, and you used it to save someone's life. After he left, Elaine sat in her studio for a long time, thinking about his words. She had spent 15 years building a new identity, keeping her past carefully compartmentalized. But the search for Sarah had cracked that compartment open, and now she had to decide what to do about it. The decision was partially made for her the next day, when Sarah, home from the hospital and resting in her apartment, asked if Elaine would visit. I wanted to thank you properly, Sarah said when Elaine arrived. She was on her couch, her ankle elevated, looking tired, but much better than she had in the forest. Jessica told me how you analyzed the photos I sent, how you figured out where I had gone. She said it was like something from a detective show. I'm just glad we found you. But how did you know to look at the photos that way? Jessica said you enhanced them, found details no one else had noticed, traced my route from tiny clues. That's not normal photography knowledge. Elaine sat down in the chair across from Sarah. The young woman was looking at her with curiosity, but also with something else. Understanding, perhaps, or at least willingness to understand. Before I came to Glenford, Elaine began slowly. I worked as a forensic photographer for a police department. I documented crime scenes, analyzed evidence, helped solve cases through careful examination of photographs. I did that work for 20 years. Sarah's eyes widened. Wow, that must have been intense. It was. Too intense eventually. I had to leave, to find something different. I came here to escape that life, to be someone else. Portrait painting gave me a way to use my skills for something positive, something that celebrates life instead of documenting tragedy. But you still have those skills. And when it mattered, when I was lost out there, you used them to find me. Sarah's voice was thick with emotion. You could have just been a regular volunteer, walked around calling my name like everyone else. But you didn't. You brought everything you knew, everything you'd learned, and you used it to save my life. Anyone would have done the same. No, Sarah said firmly. They wouldn't have because they couldn't have. What you did required special knowledge and experience. You saw things in those photos that no one else could have seen. Elaine felt tears prick her eyes. She hadn't allowed herself to feel the full weight of what had happened, had kept herself in analytical mode. But now, sitting with Sarah safe and recovering, it hit her. I'm so glad you're okay, she said, her voice breaking slightly. I am, thanks to you. And now I know something new about you, something important. But here's the thing, Elaine. You get to decide what to do with that information. If you want to go back to just being our local portrait artist, that's fine. Your past is your own. But if you ever want to talk about it, if you ever want to share more, I'm here to listen. It was exactly what Elaine needed to hear. Understanding without pressure, acceptance without demands. They talked for another hour, carefully skirting the deeper details of Elaine's past, but establishing a new level of friendship, one built on shared experience and mutual respect. The weeks following Sarah's rescue passed quickly. Fall deepened into late autumn. the trees losing their leaves, the air growing crisp. Sarah recovered well, though she was limited in mobility for several weeks. She continued planning the fall festival from home, and Elaine visited regularly to help with coordination. Word of Elaine's background had spread through Glenford, but not in the sensational way she had feared. Sheriff Martinez had been discreet, and Sarah had been careful about what she shared. The general knowledge was that Elaine had professional photography experience that had helped locate Sarah, and most people left it at that. Those who asked more direct questions got a carefully crafted response from Elaine. Yes, she had worked in forensic photography. Yes, it was demanding work. Yes, she preferred her current life as an artist. Most people respected her privacy and didn't push for details. What surprised Elaine was how little her life changed on a day-to-day basis. She was still the portrait artist of Glenford, still worked in her studio above the hardware store, still had the same friends and acquaintances. The rescue hadn't fundamentally altered her identity in the town. It had simply added a new facet to how people understood her. Tom Harrison summed it up one morning over coffee. "So, you used to do fancy crime photography before you became our local Rembrandt?" "Huh. Explains why you're so good at capturing people's faces. You're trained to see details others miss. But you're still just Elaine to us." It was exactly the right thing to say, and Elaine felt something loosen in her chest that had been tight for 15 years. The fall festival approached rapidly. Working with Sarah and the other organizers, Elaine had helped create an impressive showcase of local art. The library's community room had been transformed into a gallery with paintings, photographs, sculptures, and craftwork arranged by theme as Sarah had originally envisioned. The Portraits of Our Town section was particularly moving. It included not just Elaine's portrait work, but also photographs from various town residents, sketches, even some children's artwork from the school. Together, they created a tapestry of Glenford's faces, young and old, lifelong residents and relative newcomers, each one a piece of the town's collective story. Elaine had contributed several of her portraits, including the one of Mrs. Peterson that had brought tears to the baker's eyes. She had also, somewhat reluctantly, included a special piece, a portrait of Sarah Chen, painted from memory during the days after her rescue. The festival opened on a Saturday in late October. The weather cooperated beautifully, sunny but cool, perfect autumn weather. The entire town seemed to turn out, along with visitors from surrounding communities who had heard about the expanded event. Elaine spent the morning in the art showcase room, standing near her portraits, answering questions from viewers. Many people commented on her ability to capture not just physical likeness, but personality, emotion, the essential character of her subjects. "It's like they're about to speak," one woman said, staring at the portrait of Mr. Henderson. "You can see his kindness just looking at his eyes." "That's the goal," Elaine replied. "To show not just what someone looks like, but who they are." Sarah arrived mid-morning, still using a walking boot for her ankle but moving with increasing confidence. She made her way to Elaine's section and stood for a long moment before her own portrait. "You made me look braver than I feel," she said quietly. "I painted what I saw," Elaine replied. Someone who had the courage to venture into the unknown, the resourcefulness to survive when things went wrong, and the grace to thank her rescuers even while injured and exhausted. That's all there. Sarah hugged her, carefully balancing on her good foot. "Thank you. For everything. The portrait, yes. But mostly for finding me. For using your skills when it mattered most." The afternoon brought the artist demonstrations Sarah had planned. Local painters showed their techniques, potters worked their wheels, craftspeople explained their processes. Elaine had agreed, with some reluctance, to do a demonstration of portrait sketching. A volunteer from the audience sat for her while she worked in charcoal on large paper, explaining her process as she went. "I start with the overall structure," she narrated, her hand moving surely across the paper. "The shape of the head, the placement of features. Then I look for the unique details, the way the eyes sit, the specific curve of the mouth, the individual character of the face. Every face tells a story, and as an artist, my job is to read that story and translate it to the page." The crowd watched with fascination as the portrait emerged. When she finished, there was genuine applause. The volunteer, a teenage girl, looked at her portrait with wonder. "That's really me," she said, touching the paper gently. "Not just what I look like, but it's like you saw something deeper." "I did," Elaine said simply. "I saw a young woman on the edge of adulthood, still deciding who she wants to be, but with determination and intelligence in her eyes. That's what I drew." Later, as the festival continued with music and food vendors outside, Elaine found herself standing with Sheriff Martinez and Tom Harrison, watching the activity. "This turned out well," the sheriff commented. "Sarah's vision really came together." "It did," Tom agreed. "And having Elaine coordinate the art showcase made a huge difference. She knows how to present things, how to make them meaningful." They were quiet for a moment, comfortable in each other's company. Then Tom spoke again, his voice more serious. "You know, Elaine, I've been thinking about something. When you found Sarah, you used skills most people don't have, but those skills could be useful in other ways too. Not necessarily for emergencies like that, but for the community in general." "What do you mean?" Elaine asked, though she had a feeling she knew where this was going. "Well, the Historical Society has been trying to document the town's history, and they have all these old photographs, decades worth, some going back to the 1800s. They need help identifying people in them, dating them, organizing them. Your analytical skills with photographs could be invaluable for that kind of work." Sheriff Martinez added, "And I've been wondering if you'd be willing to do some training for our volunteer search and rescue team, teaching them how to analyze photographs, how to look for clues in images. It could make a real difference in future situations." Elaine considered this. They weren't asking her to return to her old work, to deal with crime scenes or traumatic material. They were asking her to use her skills in ways that served the community, that built up rather than documented destruction. "I think I could do that," she said slowly. "Yes, I'd be happy to help with both of those things." Tom clapped her on the shoulder. "Excellent. The Historical Society will be thrilled, and honestly, it'll be good for you too. Those skills you have, they're too valuable to completely set aside. Using them in positive ways for projects that matter to the community, that's a good balance." He was right, Elaine realized. She didn't have to choose between completely suppressing her past and completely returning to it. There was a middle ground where she could use her unique abilities in ways that felt safe and meaningful. As the evening drew on and the festival continued with lanterns being lit around the square, Sarah found Elaine again. "I want to show you something," Sarah said, leading her to a quiet corner of the library. They climbed the stairs to the second floor, where the historical archives were kept. On the wall, Sarah had hung a new plaque. It read, "In recognition of Elaine Moore, whose dedication to her craft and her community led to a life saved. October 2024. "I know you don't like a lot of attention," Sarah said. "But this needed to be here. Not just for what you did for me, but as a reminder that everyone has skills and talents that can make a difference. You could have kept your past completely hidden, never used those abilities again, but when it mattered, you chose to help. That's what real community is about." Elaine felt overwhelmed, but also, strangely, at peace. "Thank you, Sarah. That means more than you know." They stood together, looking out the window at the festival below, their town, their community, celebrating together. It was a good life, Elaine thought. Different from what she had imagined when she first fled here 15 years ago, but good in ways she hadn't expected. As November arrived, Glenford settled into the quieter rhythms of late autumn. The festival had been such a success that the town council was already discussing making the expanded format permanent. Sarah had returned to full duties at the library, her ankle fully healed, and was already planning a winter reading program. Elaine found herself busier than usual. Word of her portrait work had spread beyond Glenford due to the festival, and she had several new commissions from people in neighboring towns. But she also had the new projects Tom and Sheriff Martinez had mentioned, working with the Historical Society on their photograph collection and developing training materials for the search and rescue volunteers. The Historical Society work was fascinating in ways she hadn't expected. The old photographs of Glenford, some dating back to the 1880s, were like windows into the past. Using her analytical skills, Elaine helped identify people, date images based on clothing and architectural details, and piece together stories of the town's development. "This one," she said to Dorothy Mills, the Historical Society president, pointing to a faded photo of Main Street, "is from approximately 1912 to 1915. You can tell by the model of automobiles visible here and the style of the women's dresses. And this building?" She indicated a structure in the background. "That's where the hardware store is now, but it was a different business then." Dorothy was amazed. "How can you tell all that from such small details?" "Training and practice. When you spend years examining photographs for evidence, you learn to see everything. What's in focus and what's not, what's prominent and what's in the background. Every detail can matter." The work was satisfying in a way her portrait painting was not. Portraits were creative, interpretive, personal. This historical work was analytical, puzzle-solving, connecting pieces of information to form a complete picture. It used a different part of her skill set, one she had thought she would never exercise again. She realized, working through those old photographs, that she had missed this kind of analysis. Not the darkness of crime scenes, not the trauma of what she had documented, but the pure intellectual challenge of reading photographs, finding patterns, drawing conclusions. The search and rescue training was equally rewarding. Sheriff Martinez arranged for her to meet with the volunteer team on several evenings, teaching them basics of photographic analysis. When someone is missing and you have photographs from before they disappeared, those images can tell you a lot, she explained to the attentive group. Not just where they were, but potentially where they were going, what they were interested in, what their mindset was. She used Sarah's photos as a case study, with Sarah's permission, showing how she had analyzed the images to determine where to search. The key is to look at everything in the frame, not just the obvious subject. Background details, the quality of light, the timestamps if available, any text visible in the image, all of these can provide clues. Mike, who had helped search for Sarah, raised his hand. "How do you train yourself to see that way? It's not natural for most people." "It's not," Elaine agreed. "It requires practice and patience. You have to slow down your observation, resist the urge to glance and move on. Look at a photograph for 2 minutes, really look, and you'll see things you didn't notice in the first 5 seconds." She gave them exercises, photographs to analyze, practice scenarios to work through. Some of the volunteers were naturals, with good observational skills. Others struggled at first but improved with practice. Sheriff Martinez attended these sessions, and afterward, he and Elaine often talked. "You're a good teacher, he told her one evening as they walked from the community center where the training was held. Patient, clear, you know how to break down complex ideas into understandable pieces. I never taught when I was working as a forensic photographer, Elaine replied. I was always just one person in a large department doing my specific job. This is different. Sharing knowledge rather than just applying it. Have you ever thought about doing more of it? There are law enforcement agencies that would love to have someone with your skills provide training. Elaine shook her head. No, I don't want to go back into that world, even as a trainer. This, helping the volunteer search and rescue team here in Glenford. This feels right. It's community-focused. It's about preparation for emergencies, not about dealing with crime. That's an important distinction for me. He nodded, understanding. Everyone has their boundaries. Knowing yours and respecting them is wisdom. As December approached, Glenford transformed for the holidays. Lights appeared on Main Street, wreaths on doors, the holiday spirit permeating the town. The library hosted a holiday book sale, and Elaine helped Sarah set up a display of local authors' works. They had become closer friends in the months since the rescue. Sarah had a way of drawing people out, of getting them to share more than they intended, but she always did it with such genuine interest and care that it felt natural. One evening, as they were arranging books in the library after hours, Sarah asked a question that had clearly been on her mind. Do you ever miss it? Your old work? Elaine paused in her task, considering. I miss certain aspects of it. The puzzle solving, the feeling of using my skills to make a difference, the intellectual challenge. But I don't miss the toll it took, the nightmares, the accumulated weight of all that darkness, the way it was slowly eroding my sense of hope. What made you finally leave? Elaine had known this question would come eventually. Sarah deserved an honest answer, given what they had been through together. There was a case, she began slowly. A difficult one. The details don't matter, but it was the culmination of 20 years of similar cases, of documenting humanity's worst moments. Something broke in me. I realized I couldn't do it anymore, couldn't carry that weight. I needed to stop before it completely destroyed me. That must have been scary, leaving a career you'd had for so long. Terrifying, Elaine admitted, but necessary, and it turned out to be the right choice. Coming here, starting over, learning to use my skills in different ways, it gave me my life back. Sarah was quiet for a moment. I'm glad you came to Glenford. Not just because you saved my life, though that's obviously huge, but because you've become part of our community, part of what makes this place special. Your portraits capture the soul of this town. Your quiet presence in the book club makes everyone feel heard. The way you helped make the festival showcase so meaningful, all of that matters. Thank you, Elaine said softly. That means more than you know. For years, I thought my value was in my forensic work, in being good at a very specific, difficult job. But here, I've learned that value can come from different sources. From creating beauty, from being present in community, from quiet contributions that don't involve trauma or darkness. You're using your powers for good, Sarah said with a slight smile, just in different ways than before. It was a simple statement, but it resonated with Elaine. She wasn't hiding from her past anymore, wasn't completely suppressing her skills. She was redirecting them, using them in ways that built up rather than documented destruction, that created rather than simply recorded. Winter settled over Glenford with characteristic New England thoroughness. Snow covered the streets, icicles hung from eaves, and the town took on the picturesqueness of a holiday card. The library became a warm refuge for townspeople escaping the cold, and Elaine's studio, with its large windows and good light, became a beacon above the hardware store. She was working on a series of commissions that would take her through the winter: a family portrait for the Hendersons' anniversary gift to their children, a memorial portrait of Mrs. Thompson's late husband from old photographs, and several smaller pieces for holiday gifts. The memorial portrait was challenging in a way that felt familiar. Working from photographs to create a portrait of someone she had never met required the same kind of analytical skill she had used in her forensic work. She studied multiple photographs, learning the man's face from different angles, in different lighting, at different ages. She interviewed Mrs. Thompson about her husband's personality, his mannerisms, his character. "He had this way of smiling that reached his eyes," Mrs. Thompson said, looking at a photograph from their wedding day. "Even in his serious moments, there was warmth in his gaze. Can you capture that?" "I'll do my best," Elaine promised. She worked on the portrait over several weeks, building up layers of paint, adjusting and refining. It wasn't just about physical likeness. It was about capturing the essence of a person from memories and photographs, creating an image that would bring comfort to a grieving widow. When she finally showed Mrs. Thompson the completed portrait, the older woman stood in silence for a long moment, tears running down her face. "That's him," she whispered finally. "That's my Robert. You brought him back to me." These were the moments that made Elaine's new career meaningful. She wasn't documenting tragedy. She was preserving love, celebrating life, giving people tangible connections to what mattered most to them. The Historical Society project was also progressing well. Dorothy Mills had given Elaine access to the entire archive of old photographs, and she was systematically working through them, identifying, dating, and documenting. She discovered a photograph from 1903 showing a group of women outside what appeared to be a schoolhouse. Using city records, clothing details, and architectural features, she identified most of the women and determined that the photograph documented the town's first female teacher training program. "This is significant," Dorothy told her excitedly. "We knew the program existed, but we had no visual record of it. This photograph, properly identified and dated, adds so much to our understanding of Glenford's educational history." Elaine found herself drawn into the town's past, learning its stories, understanding how it had evolved from a small farming community to the cohesive, close-knit town it was today. Each photograph was a puzzle, and solving these puzzles was deeply satisfying. One January evening, Sheriff Martinez stopped by her studio with an unusual request. "I have a situation," he said, "and I'm hoping you might be willing to help, though it's outside your usual work." Elaine set down her brush. "What kind of situation?" "We have a case. Nothing serious, no crime involved, but it requires someone who can analyze photographs and provide expert testimony. There's a property dispute between two landowners, and it hinges on where the property line was historically. We have old survey photographs from the 1960s that show the disputed area, but they need to be analyzed by someone who can speak to what they show with authority." "You want me to serve as a photographic expert?" "Essentially, yes. Would you be comfortable with that?" Elaine thought about it. This wasn't crime scene work. It was civil, documentary, using her analytical skills for a practical community purpose. "I can do that. Show me the photographs." The case was straightforward from a photographic analysis perspective. The old survey photos clearly showed landmarks that established where the property line had been historically. Elaine prepared a detailed report, noting the position of trees, structures, and natural features that could be verified against current conditions. When the case went before the town's mediation board, she presented her findings clearly and confidently. The board accepted her analysis, and the property dispute was resolved fairly based on the historical evidence. Afterward, one of the board members approached her. "Thank you for that excellent analysis, Ms. Moore. Have you considered offering this service more formally? There are often situations where expert photographic analysis could resolve questions or disputes. Elaine was surprised by the suggestion. I hadn't thought about it. You should. You have a valuable skill set. Not for anything traumatic or difficult, but for practical community needs like this case. Property disputes, historical documentation, lost person cases. There are legitimate uses for your expertise that wouldn't involve the kind of work you left behind. The idea took root in her mind. She could expand her portrait work to include occasional forensic consultation on civil matters. It would add variety to her work, use more of her skills, and serve the community in practical ways. She mentioned the idea to Sarah at their weekly book club meeting. I think it's wonderful, Sarah said immediately. You've been helping the Historical Society, training the search and rescue volunteers, and now this property case. It's like you're finding ways to use your expertise that feel right to you, that contribute without causing harm to yourself. Tom Harrison, overhearing the conversation, added his thoughts. You know, Elaine, when you first came to Glenford, you were running from your past. But what I'm seeing now is someone who's integrating her past with her present. You're not that forensic photographer anymore, but you're not completely separate from her either. You're something new, a combination of all your experiences. It was a perceptive observation. Elaine had spent years trying to completely separate her old identity from her new one, drawing a hard line between who she had been and who she was trying to become. But the search for Sarah had shown her that wasn't necessary or even possible. She could be both. The portrait artist and the forensic expert, the quiet community member and the person with specialized skills that could serve when needed. As winter loosened its grip and spring began to emerge, Glenford came back to life. The snow melted, revealing the town's bones again. Crocuses pushed through the softening ground, and the trees along Main Street began to bud. Elaine had started to take on occasional forensic consultation work alongside her portrait commissions. Word had spread through the county, and she received requests for photographic analysis on various civil matters, property disputes, historical documentation for renovation projects, authentication of old photographs for insurance purposes. She was selective about what she accepted, establishing firm boundaries. No crime scenes, no work involving violence or trauma, no cases that would require her to testify about disturbing materials. Civil matters only, historical work, missing person support for search and rescue operations. It was a balance that worked for her. The consultation work kept her analytical skills sharp and provided intellectual challenge, while her portrait work remained her primary focus and source of creative satisfaction. In April, the town council asked her to serve on a committee for updating Glenford's historical designation application. Her work with the Historical Society's photograph collection had provided crucial documentation of the town's development, and her analytical reports were exactly the kind of evidence needed for the designation. You've become our unofficial town historian, Dorothy Mills told her during one of their work sessions. Between your portrait work capturing current residents and your analysis of historical photographs, you're documenting Glenford across time. It was true, Elaine realized. Her work was creating a visual history of Glenford, who lived there, what they looked like, what their lives meant. The portraits would become historical documents themselves someday, part of the town's archive for future generations to study. The library's spring program included a community art show, smaller than the fall festival, but focused specifically on local artists. Sarah asked Elaine to curate it, selecting work from various town residents and arranging it meaningfully. Elaine chose pieces that told stories about Glenford, landscapes showing familiar views, still lifes featuring objects from local homes, portraits of community members. She arranged them in a narrative flow, creating a visual story of the town and its people. At the opening reception, she gave a short talk about the pieces and what they represented. "Art is documentation," she said to the gathered crowd. "Every painting, every photograph, every sculpture is evidence of a particular time, place, and perspective. These pieces document Glenford as it is now, the places we love, the people who make this community special, the ordinary beauty of our daily lives. Decades from now, people will look at these works to understand what Glenford was like in the 2020s. After the reception, Sarah pulled her aside. "That was beautiful. You've really found your voice here, haven't you? Not just as an artist, but as part of the community." "I have," Elaine agreed. "I didn't expect it when I came here 15 years ago. I was just running, looking for escape. But what I found was something to run toward, a place to belong, meaningful work, genuine connections with people. And you've given us so much in return. Your portraits will be treasured by families for generations. Your work with the Historical Society is preserving our past. Your training of the search and rescue volunteers has made us safer. That's not a bad legacy for 15 years." Elaine hadn't thought of it as a legacy, but Sarah was right. She had built something real here in Glenford, contributions that would outlast her, connections that mattered. In May, she received an unexpected letter. It was from the chief of police in her old city, the department where she had worked for 20 years. She opened it with some trepidation, unsure what it might contain. The letter was straightforward. The department was establishing a training program for their forensic photography unit and wondered if she would be willing to provide consultation on the curriculum. They assured her it would not require her to return to active duty or deal with cases, just to share her expertise on best practices, analytical techniques, and maintaining mental health in difficult work. Elaine set the letter aside and thought about it for several days. Part of her wanted to refuse immediately. That was her old life, the one she had left behind. But another part recognized this as an opportunity to help prevent other people from experiencing what she had, to share what she had learned about managing the psychological toll of forensic work. She talked it over with Sarah, with Tom, with Sheriff Martinez, weighing the pros and cons. "The question is," Sheriff Martinez said, "would it heal something for you, or would it reopen wounds that are better left closed?" That was indeed the question. After much consideration, Elaine wrote back to the police chief. She would provide consultation on the curriculum, particularly on the psychological aspects of forensic photography and maintaining mental health. But she would do it remotely, via video calls and written materials, not by returning to the city or the department in person. The chief agreed to her terms, and Elaine found herself in the unusual position of teaching her old colleagues without being one of them anymore. She developed materials on observational techniques, photographic analysis, documentation standards, and, most importantly, on recognizing and managing the psychological impact of the work. "The key," she wrote in one section, "is to remember that you're documenting evidence, not absorbing it. The images you capture are tools for justice, not burdens you must carry forever. Maintain boundaries between your professional observation and your personal experience. And know when it's time to step back. There's no shame in recognizing your limits." She wished someone had told her these things 20 years ago. Maybe it would have helped, maybe not. But perhaps it would help some young forensic photographer just starting out, give them strategies for surviving the work without being destroyed by it. Summer arrived with its warmth and long days. Glenford's main street bustled with activity, tourists discovering the town's charm, locals enjoying outdoor dining, children playing in the fountain square. The town had become a minor destination, known for its preserved historical character and vibrant arts community. Elaine's role in that arts community had grown. She was now recognized as more than just a portrait artist. She was a mentor to younger artists, a curator for community shows, a preservationist documenting the town's visual history, and occasionally, a forensic consultant whose analytical skills served practical needs. In July, the town celebrated its 200th anniversary with a week of events. The Historical Society put together an extensive exhibition, and Elaine's work with the photograph collection was central to it. She had identified and documented hundreds of historical images, creating a visual timeline of Glenford's 2 centuries. The exhibition opened with a gala at the library. Elaine had been reluctant to attend, uncomfortable with formal events, but Sarah insisted. "You're one of the people who made this possible," Sarah said firmly. "You need to be there." The exhibition was impressive. The photographs Elaine had analyzed were beautifully displayed with her annotations explaining their historical context. Alongside them were contemporary photographs and artwork showing Glenford as it was now, creating a powerful contrast between past and present. Mayor Bradley gave a speech praising the Historical Society's work, specifically mentioning Elaine's contributions. When Elaine Moore came to Glenford 15 years ago, we gained more than a talented artist. We gained someone whose unique skills and dedicated work have helped us understand and preserve our history. Her analysis of our historical photographs has revealed stories we didn't know, identified people we had forgotten, and documented changes we didn't fully appreciate. She has become our memory keeper, and we are grateful. The recognition was uncomfortable, but also, Elaine had to admit, gratifying. She had spent so long trying to hide her abilities, to be invisible in her competence. Being acknowledged felt strange, but not unwelcome. After the ceremony, people approached her with questions, thanking her for her work, sharing their own memories and connections to the historical photographs. She fielded question after question, explaining her analytical process, discussing the town's history, accepting compliments with practiced grace. Tom Harrison appeared at her elbow with a glass of wine. "You're the star of the show, Elaine. How does it feel?" "Overwhelming," she admitted. "But also, good. Strange to say, but good. You've earned it. And more importantly, you've found a way to use your gifts that doesn't destroy you. That's wisdom, that is." Later in the evening, Sarah found her looking at one of the historical photographs, an image from 1925 showing Main Street, with people in period dress going about their daily business. "What do you see when you look at that?" Sarah asked. "I see the same street we walk every day, but layered with history. The building where my studio is, it's right there, though it was a different business then. The fountain where teenagers gather now, it was brand new in this photo, just installed. The people in this image, they're all gone now, but they lived full lives here, just like we do. They had hopes and fears, relationships and challenges, ordinary days and extraordinary moments. And your portraits of today's Glenford residents will be like this someday," Sarah said. "People in 2125 will look at them the same way, seeing our time as history, wondering about our lives. That's both humbling and comforting. It reminds me that what we do matters, but also that we're just one small piece of a much larger story." They stood together, looking at the past and thinking about the future. The next day, Elaine returned to her normal routine, working on a portrait commission, meeting with Dorothy to discuss the next phase of the historical photograph project, planning the fall art showcase with Sarah. Life in Glenford had found its rhythm again. In August, she received another unexpected contact. This one came through Sheriff Martinez, who appeared at her studio one afternoon with a man she didn't recognize. Elaine, this is Detective Mark Rivera from the State Police. He's hoping you might be able to help with something. Rivera was in his 40s, professional in bearing, with tired eyes that suggested he had seen too much. Elaine recognized the look. She had seen it in her own mirror often enough before leaving the city. Ms. Moore? Rivera began. I understand you have expertise in forensic photograph analysis. I'm working on a cold case, a missing person who disappeared 20 years ago. We have some photographs from that time that might contain clues we've missed. Sheriff Martinez suggested you might be willing to take a look. Elaine's first instinct was to refuse. Cold cases meant looking at images of people who had come to harm, exactly the kind of work she had left behind. But Rivera continued before she could speak. I should clarify, this isn't a homicide case. It's a young woman who walked away from her life and disappeared. Her family has never stopped looking. We have photos from the days before she left, and we're wondering if there are any clues about where she might have gone. It's entirely voluntary, and I understand if you're not comfortable with it. Elaine considered. A missing person who had left voluntarily was different from a crime victim. This was more like Sarah's case, looking for clues in photographs that might help find someone. No trauma, no violence, just a puzzle to solve. I can look at them, she said finally. No guarantees that I'll find anything useful, but I can apply my analytical skills to the images. Rivera pulled out a folder of photographs and explained the case. The missing woman, Amanda Torres, had been 23 when she disappeared. She had left no note, taken no clothes or possessions beyond what she was wearing. Her family was devastated, but had never given up hope that she might be alive somewhere. The photographs Rivera had were from Amanda's social media in the week before she disappeared. Elaine studied them carefully, applying all her forensic skills. She enhanced images, analyzed backgrounds, looked for any clues about Amanda's state of mind or intentions. In one photograph, taken 2 days before Amanda disappeared, something caught Elaine's eye. Amanda was at a coffee shop, smiling at the camera, but on the table beside her laptop was visible. The screen was angled so that it was partially readable. Elaine enhanced and zoomed the image until she could make out what was on the screen. A travel blog about Costa Rica, specifically about a small coastal town called Puerto Viejo. Did you know Amanda was interested in Costa Rica? She asked Rivera. Not that her family mentioned. Why? Elaine showed him what she had found. It's not definitive proof of anything, but it's a lead. If she was researching this specific place shortly before disappearing, it might indicate where she went. Rivera took the information with cautious hope. I'll follow up on this. Thank you, Ms. Moore. This is exactly the kind of detail we need, but might have missed. 2 weeks later, Rivera returned with news. Following up on the Costa Rica lead, he had contacted authorities there and eventually located Amanda Torres. She was alive and well, living in Puerto Viejo under a different name. She had left her old life due to personal reasons she declined to share publicly, but she agreed to contact her family to let them know she was safe and had chosen to leave. You gave a family closure, Rivera told Elaine. 20 years of not knowing, and now they have an answer. Amanda's an adult and can make her own choices about her life, but at least they know she's alive and well. That's because you saw what we didn't in that photograph. After he left, Elaine sat in her studio for a long time thinking. She had solved a case, used her forensic skills to help find someone, and it had felt okay. Not traumatic, not overwhelming, just satisfying in a professional way. Maybe her skills didn't have to be completely set aside. Maybe she could use them selectively, in cases like this, where the outcome wouldn't add to her burden of traumatic memories. That evening, she talked with Sarah about it at their weekly book club meeting. I think you're finding your way to a new balance, Sarah said thoughtfully. Not running from your past anymore, but not letting it define you either. Using your skills when and how it feels right to you, maintaining boundaries that protect your well-being. It's taken 15 years to get here, Elaine replied. Maybe that's how long it needed to take. You couldn't have done this when you first came to Glenford. You needed time to heal, to establish a new identity, to feel secure enough to let your old skills back in without being consumed by them. Sarah was right. The woman who had fled to Glenford 15 years ago had been broken, running from unbearable trauma. She had needed to completely separate from her past to survive. But the woman Elaine was now, the portrait artist, the community member, the mentor, and historian. She was strong enough to selectively engage with those old skills without losing herself. As autumn returned and Glenford prepared for another fall festival, Elaine found herself reflecting on the full year since Sarah's rescue. It had been a year of transformation, of carefully letting down walls she had built, of discovering that her past and present didn't have to be in opposition. The fall festival planning was in full swing, and this year Sarah wanted to do something special. A retrospective of Elaine's work showing how she captured the town over the past 15 years. "You've painted so many residents," Sarah explained enthusiastically. "We could create a timeline of your portraits, showing how the town has changed and stayed the same. It would be beautiful and meaningful." Elaine was reluctant at first. A whole exhibition focused on her work felt self-centered. But as she began gathering her portraits for consideration, she saw what Sarah meant. Together, they told the story of Glenford. There were the Hendersons at 50 years of marriage and now at their 60th anniversary. Two portraits showing the same couple with 10 more years of life written on their faces. There were children Elaine had painted who were now teenagers, their transformations captured in before and after pairs. There were residents who had passed away, their portraits now precious memories for their families. There were newcomers to town, captured at the moment they became part of Glenford's fabric. "It's not just about your artistic skill," Sarah said as they organized the portraits. "Though that's evident. It's about how you've been witnessing this community, documenting it through portraits in the same way you used to document crime scenes. But here, you're documenting life, love, community, connection." The festival opened on a perfect October Saturday, much like the previous year. The retrospective of Elaine's work was displayed in the library's community room, organized chronologically to show the passage of time. The response was overwhelming. People moved through the exhibition with tears in their eyes, recognizing loved ones, remembering moments, seeing themselves and their community reflected back through Elaine's eyes. Mrs. Peterson stood before her own portrait for a long time. "I'll be gone someday," she said softly to Elaine, "but this will remain. My great-grandchildren will see this and know what their great-grandmother looked like, how she smiled, who she was." "That's the goal," Elaine replied, "to preserve not just appearance, but presence." The festival included a panel discussion that Sarah had organized, "The Art of Seeing, Photography and Portrait Painting in Community Documentation." Elaine was one of the speakers, along with a local photographer, a historian, and a museum curator from a nearby city. Speaking to the assembled crowd, Elaine found words she hadn't known she needed to say. "For 20 years, I used my observational skills to document tragedy and loss. It was important work, necessary work, but it took a toll. When I came to Glenford, I needed to find a way to use those same skills. The ability to really see, to notice details, to understand what an image conveys, in a way that celebrated life instead of documenting death." She paused, looking at the portraits displayed around the room. "These portraits are my way of saying that seeing, really seeing, can be an act of love. When I paint someone, I'm studying their face with intense focus, learning their features, understanding their character. I'm bearing witness to their existence, their importance, their story. Every person matters enough to be truly seen, to be carefully documented, to be remembered. There was silence when she finished, then sustained applause. Several people approached her afterward, thanking her for her words, sharing their own stories of loss and remembrance. One woman, a stranger from a neighboring town, waited until the crowd thinned. "My daughter disappeared 5 years ago," she said quietly. "The police say they've done everything they can, but I still hope. Would you be willing to look at the photographs from before she vanished, just to see if there's anything that might help?" Elaine felt the old reluctance rise up, but she pushed through it. "Yes," she said. "I'll look. I can't promise I'll find anything, but I'll apply everything I know to the task." The woman's relief was palpable. "Thank you. Just knowing someone with your skills is willing to look. It means everything." Later, Sheriff Martinez found Elaine standing alone in a quiet corner, looking at her portraits. "You've become someone people turn to when they need help," he observed. "Not just for portraits, but for your analytical skills, your ability to see what others miss. Are you comfortable with that role?" "I'm learning to be," Elaine replied. "I spent so long running from that part of myself. Now I'm discovering I can engage with it on my own terms, helping when it feels right, maintaining boundaries that protect me. That's growth. Real, hard-won growth." As the festival continued over the weekend, Elaine found herself surrounded by her community in the deepest sense. These were people who knew her now, knew both who she had been and who she had become, who valued both her artistic gifts and her analytical skills, who accepted the full complexity of her history and her present. Tom Harrison said it best on Sunday afternoon as they were taking down the exhibition. "You came here hiding from yourself, Elaine, but you've found yourself instead. All the pieces of you, the forensic photographer, the artist, the friend, the community member, they all fit together now. You're not fragments anymore. You're whole." Winter arrived again, Elaine's 16th in Glenford. The rhythms of small-town life continued. The holidays with their decorations and celebrations, the quiet months of January and February, the anticipation of spring. But this winter was different for Elaine. She had opened a new chapter in her life, taking on selective forensic consultation work alongside her portrait commissions. Word had spread carefully through appropriate channels. She was available for photograph analysis in missing person cases, historical documentation, and certain civil matters. Not crime scenes, not trauma cases, but carefully chosen situations where her skills could help. The mother of the missing daughter whose photographs Elaine had examined at the festival stayed in touch. Elaine's analysis had revealed that the daughter had been researching international volunteer programs before her disappearance. Following that lead, her family eventually located her. She was safe, working at a wildlife conservation project in Kenya, having left home to pursue a dream her family hadn't known about. "You gave me my daughter back," the mother told Elaine on the phone, crying with relief. "Not by finding her. She had the right to make her own choices. But by showing us where to look, by seeing what we couldn't see in those photographs. Now we're in contact again. The relationship is healing. Thank you." Each case like this felt like a small redemption. Elaine wasn't changing her past, couldn't undo the 20 years of trauma documentation. But she was proving to herself that her skills could be used for good, could bring closure and healing rather than adding to the world's darkness. The portrait work continued to be her primary focus and greatest source of satisfaction. In February, she completed a major project, a group portrait of the town council, commissioned to hang in the town hall. It showed all 9 council members in a composition that honored both their individual characters and their collective responsibility to the community. It's not just about painting faces, she explained to an art student who came to observe her work. It's about capturing relationships, the way people relate to each other, the dynamics of a group. See how I've positioned them? The mayor is central but not dominant. The others are arranged to suggest collaboration rather than hierarchy. The lighting draws the eye around the whole composition, suggesting unity. The student, a young woman named Kelly who attended the regional college, was fascinated. You're thinking like a storyteller, not just a painter. Exactly. Every portrait tells a story. My job is to make sure it's a true story, that it captures reality, but also meaning. Kelly had sought Elaine out specifically because of her forensic background. She was studying criminal justice and photography and hoped to become a forensic photographer herself. How do you do it? Kelly asked during one visit. How do you use those observational skills without being destroyed by what you see? Elaine thought carefully before answering. You set boundaries. You recognize your limits. You maintain a life outside the work that nourishes you rather than draining you. And most importantly, you know when to step back. There's no shame in saying, I've seen enough, I need to do something different. But you came back to it, in a way. I did, but on my own terms. I choose my cases now. I use my skills when and how I want to, for purposes I believe in. That's completely different from being employed full-time in forensic work, where you have no control over what you're exposed to. Kelly absorbed this thoughtfully. So it's about agency, having choice over how you use your skills. Yes, exactly that. These conversations with Kelly reminded Elaine of how far she had come. 16 years ago, she couldn't have discussed her forensic work without triggering anxiety and nightmares. Now, she could talk about it calmly, could even mentor someone interested in the field, because she had established healthy boundaries and found balance. In March, the Historical Society asked her to take on a new project, creating portrait sketches of historical Glenford residents based on old photographs for an educational program at the local school. We have these wonderful photographs of important townspeople from the 1800s, Dorothy Mills explained. But they're in that formal, stiff style of early photography. We thought if you could paint them in your style, more warm and personal, it would help students connect with these historical figures as real people. It was a fascinating challenge, combining her portrait skills with her analytical work. She studied the old photographs intently, reading the subjects' faces despite the limitations of early photographic technology. Then she painted them as she imagined they would look in a candid moment, not posed stiffly for the camera, but as living, breathing people. The result was a series of portraits that brought Glenford's history to life. Students who had found the historical photographs boring were captivated by Elaine's painted versions. They look like real people now, one fifth grader said, studying Elaine's portrait of Glenford's first female mayor, painted in 1889. Like someone I could actually talk to. That's because they were real people, Elaine replied. They lived in different times, wore different clothes, had different concerns than we do. But they were fundamentally the same. They loved, worked, worried, hoped, dreamed. Just like us. The project won praise from the school board and from parents who saw their children suddenly interested in local history. For Elaine, it was another example of how her skills could serve the community in meaningful ways. Spring arrived with its usual promise of renewal. Elaine's studio was busy with commission requests, so many that she had to start scheduling months in advance. Her reputation had grown beyond Glenford, and people from across the region sought her portrait work. But she was careful not to overcommit. She had learned the danger of being consumed by work, of losing balance. She maintained her schedule of community activities, the weekly book club, her work with the Historical Society, her training sessions with the search and rescue volunteers, her friendship with Sarah and others in town. In April, she received an invitation that surprised her. The police department in her old city was holding a ceremony to honor forensic specialists who had contributed to solving cold cases, and they wanted to include her, recognizing several cases from her 20-year career that had resulted in justice for victims' families. Elaine's first impulse was to decline. Returning to that city, to that department, would mean facing her past directly. But she found herself reconsidering. She had spent 16 years building a new life, had found balance and peace. Perhaps she was strong enough now to face what she had been. She talked it over with Sarah one evening at the library. "What are you afraid will happen if you go?" Sarah asked gently. "That I'll be pulled back into that world. That seeing it again will undo all the healing I've done here. Do you really think you're that fragile? After everything you've accomplished, all the ways you've grown?" Elaine considered this. "No," she said slowly. "I don't think I am. But the fear is still there." So maybe going would prove to yourself that the fear has no power anymore, that you can face your past without being controlled by it. It was a compelling argument. Elaine decided to accept the invitation. In mid-May, she made the trip to her old city. It was strange to be back in the urban environment after so many years in Glenford's small-town setting. The noise, the crowds, the pace of life, it all felt foreign now. The ceremony was held at the police department's headquarters. Walking through those doors again, 16 years after she had fled through them for the last time, was surreal. The building looked the same, but also different, updated in small ways. Many of her former colleagues were there. Older now, some retired, some still working. They greeted her warmly, expressed genuine pleasure at seeing her again. "We heard you became an artist," her old captain said. "That's good. You always had an eye for composition. But we still remember your forensic work. It was exceptional." The ceremony recognized several forensic specialists, including lab technicians, evidence analysts, and photographers. When they called Elaine's name, listing the cases she had contributed to, she felt a complex mix of emotions: pride in the work she had done, sadness for the victims those cases represented, and relief that she had survived that chapter of her life. Accepting the plaque they presented, she spoke briefly to the assembled crowd. "Forensic work is essential to justice, but it comes with a cost. I'm honored to be recognized for my contributions, but I also want to acknowledge that this work changed me, challenged me, and eventually required me to step away to preserve my mental health. There's no shame in recognizing your limits. To the forensic specialists still doing this difficult work, thank you. But also, please take care of yourselves. The work matters, but so do you." After the ceremony, several younger forensic workers approached her, thanking her for addressing the mental health aspect of the work. "Nobody talks about that," one young photographer said. "We're supposed to just toughen up and handle it. Hearing someone with your reputation acknowledge the psychological toll, that means a lot." Driving back to Glenford that evening, Elaine felt a sense of closure she hadn't expected. She had faced her past directly and had not been overwhelmed by it. She could acknowledge the work she had done, feel appropriate pride in it, and still be grateful she had moved on to something different. When she arrived home, Glenford felt like a welcome embrace. The quiet streets, the familiar buildings, the slower pace. This was home now, truly and completely. Tom saw her arriving and came out of the hardware store. "How was it?" "Necessary," Elaine replied. "And good. I'm glad I went, and I'm glad to be home." That's the perfect response. Come on, Maggie's is still open. Let's get you some coffee and you can tell me about it. Sitting in Maggie's coffee house with Tom, sipping a latte and recounting the day, Elaine felt the last pieces of her fragmentation healing. She was one person now, integrated and whole. Her past and present no longer in conflict, but part of a continuous story. Summer brought a new development. The state university's criminal justice program contacted Elaine, asking if she would consider teaching a course on forensic photography and photographic analysis. It would be one class per semester, focused on technique, analytical skills, and professional ethics. You could shape the next generation of forensic photographers, the department head explained during their phone conversation. Teach them not just the technical skills, but also how to maintain mental health, how to process what they see, how to recognize when they need help. That wisdom is rare and valuable. Elaine was intrigued despite her reservations. Teaching would be different from doing the work. She would be sharing knowledge without being directly exposed to traumatic material. And the opportunity to help young forensic photographers avoid some of the pitfalls she had experienced was appealing. "I'd want to teach it remotely," she said. "Online lectures and assignments. I've built a life in Glenford that I don't want to disrupt. That's completely feasible. We've expanded our online offerings significantly." She agreed to develop the course for the fall semester. Over the summer, she worked on the curriculum, drawing on her 20 years of experience plus what she had learned in her 16 years since. The course she designed covered technical skills, lighting, composition, documentation standards, enhancement techniques, but it also included substantial content on psychological resilience, maintaining boundaries, processing trauma, and knowing when to seek help. "Photography is about seeing," she wrote in the course introduction. "Forensic photography is about seeing things most people don't want to look at. This course will teach you how to see with professional objectivity while maintaining your humanity." Both are essential. As she worked on the curriculum, Kelly, the criminal justice student who had been observing her portrait work, became her teaching assistant. Kelly helped organize materials, provided a student perspective on the curriculum, and shared her own concerns about entering the forensic field. "I want to do this work," Kelly said during one of their planning sessions, "but I'm afraid of becoming what my professor calls burned out and bitter. How do I avoid that?" "By learning from those who went before you," Elaine replied, "by taking the warnings seriously, by building a life outside your work that sustains you, by being honest about what you can handle, and by knowing, really knowing, that stepping back is not failure. It's self-preservation. And sometimes it's the bravest choice you can make." The first semester of the course began in September. Elaine found teaching to be both challenging and rewarding. Her students were earnest and curious, eager to learn not just the technical skills, but also how to survive in the profession. She used carefully selected case studies, ones that taught important lessons without being overwhelmingly graphic. She invited guest speakers, including Sheriff Martinez and other professionals who could provide different perspectives. And she was unflinchingly honest about the realities of the work. "Some of you will have 20-year careers in forensic photography," she told her online class during one lecture. "Some of you will discover it's not for you after a few years, or even a few months. Both outcomes are fine. The key is being self-aware enough to know which path is right for you." Student feedback was overwhelmingly positive. Many specifically mentioned appreciation for her honesty about mental health challenges and her emphasis on self-care. "Most professors treat us like machines," one student wrote in an evaluation. "Professor Moore treats us like human beings doing difficult work. That perspective is invaluable." While teaching occupied some of her time, Elaine maintained her portrait work as her primary focus. Fall brought another busy season, holiday portraits, anniversary celebrations, new families wanting to document their Glenford beginning. The town's fall festival had become an annual highlight, and this year, Sarah proposed something new, a community portrait project where Elaine would paint a large collective portrait showing Glenford residents in the town square. It would be ambitious, Sarah admitted, but think of the impact. Everyone who wants to participate would be included. We'd photograph them all, and you'd compose them into one large painted scene. It would be a snapshot of Glenford at this moment in time. The project was indeed ambitious. Elaine spent weeks photographing residents, hundreds of them, in the town square. Then she began the massive task of composing them into a coherent scene, not just randomly placed, but arranged in ways that suggested relationships and community connections. The painting took months and ended up being 6 feet tall and 12 feet wide. It showed the town square on a beautiful autumn day, with residents of all ages engaged in various activities. Children playing by the fountain, elderly couples on benches, shopkeepers outside their stores, teenagers gathered in groups, families having picnics, the mayor talking with constituents. Every face was an individual portrait, carefully painted with Elaine's characteristic attention to character and personality. But together, they created something larger, a portrait not of individuals, but of community itself. When the painting was unveiled at a special ceremony in November, the response was emotional. People searched for themselves and their loved ones, pointed out friends and neighbors, marveled at the detail and the composition. "It's us," Mrs. Peterson said simply, tears streaming down her face. "All of us, together. This is what Glenford is." The painting was installed permanently in the town hall, and within days, it had become a destination. People brought visitors to see it, pointed out family members, used it as a teaching tool for children about their community. For Elaine, it represented the culmination of 16 years of work. Each individual portrait drew on skills honed over decades. The composition utilized her understanding of visual storytelling. The overall effect captured something intangible but essential, the spirit of a place and its people. "You've created something that will outlive all of us," Sarah told her at the unveiling. 100 years from now, people will look at this and see what Glenford was like in 2024. They'll see their ancestors. They'll see the birth of the community they're part of. That's an incredible legacy. As winter settled over Glenford again, Elaine found herself in a contemplative mood. She was 66 years old now, the same age many of her portrait subjects were reaching, the age when people began to think seriously about their legacies and the meaning of their lives. She had spent 20 years in forensic work and 16 years in Glenford. The two chapters were finally equal in length, balanced on the scale of her life. But the weight was different. The forensic work had been intense, concentrated, exhausting, while the Glenford years had been expansive, restorative, increasingly rich with meaning. In December, she received an unexpected honor. The state's Arts Council selected her for a Lifetime Achievement Award, recognizing her portrait work and her contributions to community arts development. The award came with a significant grant, which she immediately designated for the Glenford Arts Initiative, a new program to support young artists in the community. "You could have kept that money," Tom pointed out. "Could have expanded your studio, hired assistants, taken an exotic vacation." "I don't need those things," Elaine replied. "But Glenford could use more support for arts education. Let the grant do some good." The award ceremony was held in the state capitol in January. Many Glenford residents made the trip to attend, filling several rows of seats in the auditorium. When Elaine walked onto the stage to accept the award, she saw their faces in the crowd. Sarah and Tom, Sheriff Martinez, Dorothy Mills, Mrs. Peterson, the Hendersons, Kelly, and dozens of others. Her community, showing up to celebrate with her. In her acceptance speech, she spoke about art as documentation, as bearing witness, as an act of love. Art is how we remember who we were and imagine who we might become. Portrait painting, specifically, is the art of really seeing another person, of looking closely enough to understand not just what they look like, but who they are. For 16 years, I've had the privilege of seeing the people of Glenford this way, of bearing witness to their lives through my portraits. This award honors me, but it really honors them. The subjects who trusted me to capture their essence, the community that embraced me when I needed a home, the town that gave me a purpose that sustained me. The applause was thunderous, but what mattered most to Elaine was the sight of her community on their feet, celebrating not just her achievement, but their collective story. After the ceremony, there was a reception. A woman approached Elaine, introducing herself as a gallery owner from the city. "I'd love to showcase your portrait work in a major exhibition," she said. "Your technique is masterful, but more than that, your portraits have a depth of character that's rare. They're not just paintings, they're psychological studies." Elaine considered the offer. A major gallery exhibition would expand her profile, potentially bring in lucrative commissions, establish her more firmly in the fine art world. But it would also take her away from Glenford, would shift her focus from community service to career advancement. She had spent 16 years choosing meaning over prestige, substance over status. The gallery offer was flattering, but not aligned with her priorities. "Thank you for the offer," she said, "but I'm quite content with my current work. My subjects are the people of my community, and that's a market I'm happy to serve." The gallery owner looked surprised. Clearly, she wasn't used to artists turning down such opportunities, but she nodded respectfully. "I understand. If you change your mind, the offer stands." Returning to Glenford felt like exhaling after holding a breath. The town was peaceful under its blanket of snow, the holiday lights still twinkling on Main Street, the familiar buildings solid and reassuring. Sarah met her at Maggie's coffee house the next morning. "I heard you turned down a big gallery offer." "News travels fast." "It's a small town. Are you sure about that decision?" "Completely sure. That world, the competitive art scene, the politics, the pressure, it's not what I want. I found my purpose here, Sarah. I'm not looking to change it." Sarah smiled. "Good. We'd miss you if you got too famous and left us for the big city." "That's not happening. I left one big city 16 years ago and have no desire to return to any others." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, sipping their coffee and watching the town wake up around them. "You know," Sarah said thoughtfully, "when I was lost in those woods, terrified and alone, I kept thinking about all the people who cared about me. The book club members who would notice I was missing. The library patrons who would wonder where I was. You, who I had been working with on the festival. Having that mental list of connections, knowing I mattered to people, that kept me focused, kept me surviving." "Community is survival," Elaine said. "I've learned that too. When I came here, I thought I was running away from something. But what I was really doing was running toward this, toward connection, toward belonging, toward mattering in a way that felt sustainable and meaningful. You do matter to so many people in so many ways, not just for your portraits, though those are wonderful, but for your presence, your quiet wisdom, your willingness to use your skills to help when needed." It was humbling to hear, but Elaine was learning to accept such acknowledgments with grace rather than deflection. February brought a new commission that challenged Elaine in unexpected ways. A Glenford family whose daughter had died in a car accident 20 years ago asked if she could create a portrait of what their daughter might look like now at age 43, based on photographs from before her death and using aging projection techniques. It was the kind of work that touched on trauma, death, loss, grief, but it was also potentially healing work, giving a family a gift of imagining who their daughter might have become. "I can try," Elaine told them. "I can't guarantee it will be accurate. Aging is influenced by so many factors. But I can create something that honors her memory and your love for her." She studied the family's photographs intensively, learning the daughter's face at ages 5, 10, 15, 18. She researched aging projection techniques, examining how faces changed over decades. She looked at photographs of the parents and their other children to understand genetic influences. The portrait she eventually painted showed a woman in her early 40s with the daughter's distinctive features, but matured, developed, showing the character that decades of living might have added. Elaine painted her smiling gently, with warmth in her eyes, the way her parents remembered her. When she showed them the finished portrait, the parents wept. "That's her," the mother whispered. "That's what she would have looked like. We'll never know for sure, but this is a gift. Thank you." It was among the most emotionally demanding work Elaine had done since coming to Glenford, but also among the most meaningful. She had used her forensic skills, the ability to analyze faces, to project from evidence, to reconstruct from incomplete information, for a purpose that brought comfort rather than simply documenting tragedy. For Elaine, it represented the culmination of 16 years of work. Each individual portrait drew on skills honed over decades. The composition utilized her understanding of visual storytelling. The overall effect captured something intangible but essential, the spirit of a place and its people. "You've created something that will outlive all of us," Sarah told her at the unveiling. 100 years from now, people will look at this and see what Glenford was like in 2024. They'll see their ancestors. They'll see the birth of the community they're part of. That's an incredible legacy. Spring arrived with a sense of renewal and completion. Elaine had been in Glenford for 16 years, and it no longer felt like she was living in Glenford as separate from her essential identity. She was Glenford, as much a part of the town as the old courthouse or Miller's Creek or the covered bridge. Her various roles had fully integrated. She was simultaneously the portrait artist, the forensic consultant, the historical preservationist, the teacher, the mentor, the community member, the friend. These weren't separate identities, but facets of one whole person. She continued her portrait commissions, which remained her primary work and greatest source of satisfaction. But she also took on selective forensic consultation, helping locate missing persons through photograph analysis, resolving property disputes through historical documentation, training search and rescue volunteers, and her online students in analytical techniques. The Historical Society project was nearly complete. She had analyzed and documented every photograph in their collection, creating a comprehensive visual archive of Glenford's history. The project had taken years, but was finally nearing completion. "This will be used by historians for decades," Dorothy Mills told her. "You've created something genuinely important, a professionally curated historical record." In April, Sheriff Martinez came to her with an unusual case. An elderly man with dementia had wandered away from his care facility and had been missing for 6 hours. The family had provided photographs from his phone, showing where he had been the previous day. Elaine analyzed the photographs quickly, identifying landmarks and creating a likely search radius based on the man's probable walking speed and direction. The search team found him within 2 hours, confused but unharmed. "You're getting good at this," the sheriff commented afterward. "Using your skills for good outcomes without the darkness of your old work." "It's what I should have been doing all along," Elaine replied. "Not documenting crimes, but helping people, solving problems, contributing to positive outcomes." Don't diminish your forensic work. It mattered too. Justice for victims matters. But yes, this is a different application of the same skills, and it suits you better. The town's Spring Arts Festival included a special exhibition curating the work of several Glenford artists over multiple decades. Elaine's portraits were central to it, showing the evolution of her style and technique over 16 years. An art critic from a major newspaper attended and wrote a glowing review. Elaine Moore's portraits transcend mere representation. Each painting is a psychological study, a character analysis, a moment of genuine human connection preserved in oil and canvas. Her technical skill is impressive, but her emotional intelligence is extraordinary. These are not just paintings of people. They are paintings about people, capturing not just appearance but essence. Moore has created an invaluable record of one small town's community, painting its soul one face at a time. The review brought more attention and more commission requests, but Elaine remained selective. She only took on subjects she could genuinely connect with, projects that felt meaningful rather than merely lucrative. In May, on the anniversary of Sarah's rescue, the town held a small ceremony by the trailhead to Miller's Ridge. They unveiled a marker thanking the search volunteers and emphasizing trail safety. Sarah spoke at the ceremony, her voice strong and clear. "2 years ago, I made a mistake that could have had tragic consequences. But this community came together to find me. Volunteers searched for days. Sheriff Martinez organized a professional operation. And Elaine Moore used her unique skills to analyze photographs and determine where to look. Together, they saved my life." This marker isn't just about trail safety. It's about what community means, about how we take care of each other. Standing among the crowd, Elaine felt the familiar warmth of belonging. This was her community. These were her people. And she had contributed to their well-being in ways both obvious, like finding Sarah, and subtle, like the portraits that adorned their homes, the historical work that preserved their past, the training that prepared them for emergencies. After the ceremony, she hiked a short distance up the trail with Sarah, Tom, and Sheriff Martinez, enjoying the spring afternoon. "Ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't come to Glenford?" Tom asked. Elaine considered. "I probably would have kept running, kept trying to escape my past. Maybe I would have eventually found another place to settle, or maybe I would have stayed fragmented, always running from myself." "Glenford saved you," Sarah said. "Yes," Elaine agreed, "but I also saved myself. I made the choice to stop running, to put down roots, to build a new life. Glenford provided the place and the community, but I did the work of healing and rebuilding. And now you're using those hard-won skills to help others," Sheriff Martinez added. "That's redemption right there." 5 years later, Elaine Moore stood in her studio, looking at a new painting on her easel. She was 71 now, her hair fully white, her face showing the marks of 71 years of living. But her eyes were clear, her hands steady, her spirit at peace. The painting before her was a self-portrait, though unlike any she had attempted before. She had painted herself in her studio, surrounded by portraits of Glenford residents, a portrait of the portrait painter, showing her in the context of her life's work. It had taken months to complete, requiring her to turn her analytical eye on herself, to see herself as objectively as she saw her subjects. The woman in the painting was complex. You could see the younger forensic photographer in her eyes, the intensity of someone trained to see truth. But you could also see the artist who had found peace, the community member who had found belonging, the teacher sharing wisdom earned through difficult experience. The painting showed her tools, brushes, paints, photographs, and in the background, visible through the studio window, the main street of Glenford, the town that had become home. She had titled it Bearing Witness, because that's what her life had been about in both its chapters. As a forensic photographer, she had borne witness to tragedy, to crime, to humanity's darkness. As a portrait artist, she bore witness to life, to character, to the dignity of individual human existence. Both were important work. Both required seeing truly, deeply, completely. The difference was what happened after the seeing. Whether it destroyed or sustained, whether it documented ending or celebrated continuing. Sarah entered the studio, as she did most afternoons now. She was 38, Glenford's head librarian and Elaine's closest friend. "Is it finished?" Sarah asked, looking at the self-portrait. "I think so. What do you see?" Sarah studied the painting for a long time. "I see someone who ran from darkness and found light. Someone who thought her best skills could only be used for sad purposes, but discovered they could bring joy. Someone who came to a small town thinking she was hiding but ended up finding herself. That's pretty much exactly right. What are you going to do with it?" Elaine smiled. "I'm donating it to the Historical Society. Decades from now, when people look at the documented history of Glenford in the early 21st century, they'll see this, the portrait artist who documented their community, shown in her studio, surrounded by the work that defined her." That seems fitting. You've spent 21 years here now, painting the faces of Glenford. You've become part of our history. 21 years. Longer than the 20 years she had spent in forensic work. The balance had finally tipped. More years of light than of darkness. More years of healing than of trauma. Elaine had continued her varied work. Portraits remained primary, but she also maintained her online teaching, her forensic consultation on carefully selected cases, her work with the Historical Society, her training of search and rescue volunteers. Each role used different aspects of her skills, keeping her engaged without overwhelming her. The students she had taught had gone on to careers in forensic work, and several had written to thank her for the mental health emphasis in her course. "You probably saved me from burnout," one former student wrote. "Your insistence that self-care and knowing our limits was professional behavior, not weakness. That changed how I approached my career." Her forensic consultation work had helped locate 7 missing persons, resolved dozens of historical documentation questions, and trained hundreds of volunteers in photograph analysis techniques. She had found a way to use her specialized skills that served others without destroying herself. But the portraits remained her legacy. Over 21 years, she had painted hundreds of Glenford residents. Walking through the town now, she could look at house after house and know that inside hung one of her portraits, capturing a loved one, preserving a memory, bearing witness to a life. The large community portrait in the town hall had become iconic. Tourists came to see it. Art students studied its composition. Residents brought their children to find family members in the crowd. It had become Glenford's visual identity, the image that said, "This is who we are." Kelly, her former teaching assistant, had become a forensic photographer and was teaching her own course now, passing on the knowledge with the same emphasis on mental health and professional boundaries. The cycle of teaching and learning continued. Tom Harrison had retired from running the hardware store and spent his time traveling, but he visited Elaine's studio regularly. "You're the success story," he told her. "You came here broken and rebuilt yourself into something whole and strong. That's inspirational." Sheriff Martinez had retired as well and occasionally helped Elaine with consultation cases, bringing his law enforcement perspective to the analyses. They had become close friends, two people who understood the weight of certain work and the importance of balance. Mrs. Peterson, now in her 80s, still ran the bakery with help from her grandchildren. Her portrait hung prominently in the shop, and she told every new customer about the talented artist who had captured her so perfectly. The Hendersons had celebrated their 65th anniversary, and Elaine had painted them again, their third portrait over the years, showing the progression of their lives together. Sarah had married and had two young children, and Elaine had painted each child as an infant, beginning their visual record just as she had done for so many Glenford families. As spring turned to summer in Elaine's 21st year in Glenford, she found herself thinking about the concept of home. She had fled one home because it had become associated with trauma. She had found another home by accident, by necessity, by desperate need. But over 2 decades, that accidental home had become the truest home she had ever known. Not because of the place, though Glenford was beautiful, but because of what she had built there: relationships, purpose, contribution, belonging. She had used her gifts, the ability to see truly, to notice details, to read faces and images with precision, in service of life rather than documentation of death. She had transformed trauma into wisdom, pain into growth, running into arriving. On a warm June evening, the town hosted a celebration for Elaine's 21st anniversary in Glenford. She had tried to discourage it. She wasn't one for fuss, but the town council had insisted. The event was held in the square, with food from local restaurants, music from the high school band, and a display of Elaine's portraits arranged around the fountain. Mayor Bradley gave a speech recognizing Elaine's contributions to the town: her artistic work, her forensic consultation, her teaching and mentoring, her historical preservation, her community service. Elaine Moore came to Glenford 21 years ago, the mayor said, and our town was transformed by her presence. Not through grand gestures, but through quiet, consistent contributions. She has painted our faces, preserved our history, trained our volunteers, and helped us in times of need. She has made Glenford better, and we are grateful. The crowd applauded, and Elaine stood uncomfortably in the spotlight, never quite at ease with such attention. But then Sarah stepped forward with a wrapped package. "The town commissioned a gift for you," she said, "and I had the honor of creating it." Elaine unwrapped the package to find a leather-bound book. Opening it, she saw it was a collection of letters from Glenford residents, each sharing what her portraits had meant to them, how her work had impacted their lives, what her presence in the community had contributed. She read through tears, letter after letter expressing gratitude, affection, appreciation. Families thanking her for preserving the images of loved ones who had since passed away. Children writing about portraits that helped them feel connected to grandparents they barely remembered. Individuals sharing how her artistic eye had captured something in them they hadn't seen in themselves. "This is too much," she said, her voice thick. "It's not enough," Tom replied, speaking for many in the crowd. "You've given us so much. These letters are just a small attempt to express our appreciation." As the celebration continued into the evening, with neighbors and friends gathering around, sharing food and stories, Elaine felt overwhelming gratitude. She had run to this place seeking escape, seeking distance from trauma, seeking any kind of peace. What she had found was so much more: a home, a community, a purpose, a way to use her gifts that sustained rather than destroyed her. She had found herself integrated and whole, no longer fragmented between who she had been and who she wanted to become. The darkness of her forensic career would always be part of her history. She couldn't erase those 20 years or forget what she had seen, but it no longer defined her. It was one chapter in a longer story, and the subsequent chapters had been about healing, growing, contributing, and belonging. As the evening stars appeared over Glenford, Elaine stood in the town square surrounded by people who knew her, valued her, appreciated her. Her portraits hung in their homes. Her analytical work had helped save lives and resolve problems. Her teaching had shaped future forensic photographers to be more resilient. Her historical work had preserved the town's visual history for future generations. She had used her ability to see, really see, to bear witness to life in all its complexity and beauty. She had documented not tragedy, but dignity, not death, but living, not endings, but continuity. And in doing so, she had saved not just others, but herself. The portrait artist of Glenford had finally painted herself into the portrait, no longer separate from the community she documented, but fully part of it. Her own story woven into the larger story of a small town that had given her what she needed most: a place to belong, a way to contribute, and a life worth living. She was home. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. We'd love to hear what inspired you the most, and where in the world are you watching from? Let us know below.